This time on Engine Masters, we're learning the ropes with a 5.7-liter Gen 3 Hemi. How much power can we make with nothing but cam and headers? Stay tuned to find out. My name is David Freiberger, and I know nothing about Gen 3 Hemis. But I'm gonna find out, and so are you, this time on Engine Masters. See, you've seen to death the stories of people pulling those GM LS engines out of junkyards and making big power, but what about the Mopar equivalent? That's what we're gonna do here today. This is the Gen 3 Hemi, the engine family that began in 2003 and runs all the way up to the current day. And we've got a junkyard fresh one right here, and we're gonna be learning how to make it run in a car for cheap and upgrade it with some headers and a camshaft. But first, I feel like I really gotta tell you how we got to this point. So let's go back to late 2019. Holley got a new chief operating officer. His name's Jeff Turk. And the thing about Holley is that every one of the high-level guys that I've met are genuine gearheads, actual car guys. And in fact, Jeff Turk is a really accomplished racer and the very first guy to go sevens in a factory stock shootout car, which happened to be a Dodge Challenger with a drag pack. So back in late 2019, we were at the PRI show, a trade show back when we used to have things like that. And I met Jeff and talked to him a little bit. And he happened to ask me, it's like, so, what do you think of the Gen 3 Hemi? And I said, well, I don't think it's ever going to be as popular as the LS swap deal. Mopar guys just don't do that to their muscle cars, and aside from that, it's complicated, but at least it's ugly. So at this point, he basically schools me, and I walk away realizing that I am a troglodyte and a chump. So Turk starts telling me about how, here's the deal. They've sold more Challengers than Mustangs and Camaros for years. These things are everywhere. They came in trucks. You can get them at any junkyard anywhere in the country. And while people may not be swapping them into their original Charger RTs and Super Bs, the swapping market for Gen 3 Hemis into things like trucks, D100s, Durangos, pickups, Dakotas is huge. And sure enough, I ended up going through some of the other aftermarket manufacturers and finding out that one of the biggest growth areas that they're all seeing is hop-ups for the Gen 3 Hemi. So I, in fact, was a chump. This was a segment of the market that I foolishly was not aware of. So therefore, here we come 10 months later, and this beautiful engine shows up on our doorstep, courtesy of Jeff Turk and Holley. What it is a 2017 Ram Truck 5.7-liter Gen 3 Hemi. Now, this is the Eagle variety that came out in 2009, the ones that have variable valve timing and also the superior cylinder heads. These things flow 330 CFM stock. Brule actually mentioned to me, is like, you realize that's about the same as a rectangle port big block Chevy cast iron head. So that's pretty impressive. And so we're gonna get to know this thing and learn it. Right now, it is completely stock with the exception of some hooker headers, which is also part of the whole Holley hook. They're making parts so that you can easily swap this engine into other vehicles. That's part of their agenda. These headers are designed for a Dodge D100 truck because they are seeing trucks as a big part of the market. But the other huge thing is this. This is the Terminator X affordable EFI box that is plug and play for the Gen 3 Hemi. This one happens to be what they call the Terminator X Max, which will control the fly-by-wire throttle body and also the transmissions that came with these cars. It's got all of the tuning stuff that you would expect from modern EFI applications. You can fiddle with all of the elements to your heart's content with it. You can also do boost management or nitrous management with these things. This one is about $1,500 give or take. The smaller unit that doesn't cover the transmission or the fly-by-wire is about $1,300. They're plug and play, and this solves a big part of my complaint about the complexity of the Mopar stuff. Plus, you get the tuning features on the computer that have become sort of the aftermarket standard with the Holley EFI. And the big deal about these, and this is honestly the very first prototype unit, is that they can control not only the variable valve timing, but also the short runner valve in the intake manifold. We plugged this thing on the dyno, and I'm not gonna say that it like fired right up and was perfect. There were some things that needed to be sorted out, some wiring and junk, really no fault of the part itself. So I'm just saying that, you know, for us carburetor guys, it wasn't 100% a no-brainer, but it was way easier than you would think and way easier than trying to make something work with the factory wiring harness, so that was pretty cool. So the point of the episode is not just to find out if I can become a convert to the Gen 3 Hemi, but also to show you what kind of cheap power we can make with a junkyard truck motor that's a 5.7 just with headers and a cam. And of course, the Terminator X Max. But first, I'm gonna sit down with the Steves and see what they think about it. Guys, I think that you collectively may be less flummoxed by the Gen 3 Hemi than I am.
Really?
You got more experience with them. We ran that one on Engine Masters like in our first season, and that's kind of it for me. Whereas you've fooled with them more, you've actually built them and had them apart and done testing with them.
Magazine articles back in the day when they first came out, a lot of magazine articles.
I never did a whole bunch with them other than did some stuff with Doug Ladd and his twin turbo thing a little bit and had them kind of apart, but certainly not what you would call familiar.
Yeah, so this is really a learning experience.
Which is good.
Yeah. You know what I have to admit is when they first came out, I was on the bandwagon of Mopar guys going, that's not a Hemi.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and subsequently I have to realize that it pretty much is.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, I have to admit, I bought in.
Well, yeah, that's just because you're a purist, you know, hanging out at Dick Landy's shop working on real Hemis.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I had to work on the ones with a vastly inefficient combustion chamber that you can't get compression in.
Yeah,
that was my shtick.
Yeah.
And these are way better than that. I guess you should put the data where my mouth is and run this thing and find out what it does.
Let's go find out.
Yeah. There's our curve. Before I read you the numbers, remember that I said this is factory rated at 395 horsepower and 410 pound-feet, but that's by the OE with a different SAE correction factor with all the accessories on it with a full exhaust system. It's not comparable apples to apples. So what we're seeing here is what we'd call the aftermarket correction factor, and of course we've got no accessories on it, a Mazira electric water pump, and the hooker headers are wide open.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at 452.8 pound-feet of torque, and it made 439.3, not 440 horsepower.
Yeah.
So having run plenty of LS engines, can you cast your mind back to a fairly stock 5.7 LS and tell me what the comparison is?
Probably close.
Yeah.
Really pretty darn close.
Kind of what I was thinking. I mean, they have similar bore and stroke. This is a bigger bore and shorter stroke than the LS motor, but similar and similar head flow, yeah?
Yeah.
I think the original LS ones were probably 25 down from this. If I recall back when we first got a couple of the original ones from 98 and 99.
Uh-huh.
If I remember right, they tested in a very similar configuration with headers and electric water pump, that sort of thing, at about 420-ish, if I recall. And of course, a camshaft just works wonders on those.
Oh, for sure. Oh, that sounds like something we have to do, right? Hemi versus LS with more data and less recollection.
We should start a really good argument with that one.
Yeah, but still, you know, I had argued about, you know, why would you put one of these into an old muscle car? They just look so bad, they're complex and all that stuff. Well, this is the reason.
Sure.
I mean,
and look at that torque.
This is even better than a Steve Dulcich 318.
Well,
But not the 383.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, I'll have to admit, with the modern intake manifold tech, you just really get a long, hard torque curve. I mean, we're well over 450 foot-pounds for a very long RPM range.
Right in here, basically, call it 3,600 to 4,600. You know what's interesting? I thought that it would be just a perfect curve from the OE, and I wonder if this has got something to do with the variable manifold runner length thing.
SRV, short runner valve.
Right.
It's actually changing the runner length, which is controllable by the Holly, right in this area. My thoughts are, and we can look at this later, but if the runner stayed long, the curve would end up being less peak power. So it's actually optimizing the tune between low RPM and high RPM between cam timing and runner length.
Which is what they do in the OE car.
Yeah.
Basically what he's talking about is the intake manifold has a flapper valve in it that switches from having a really long runner length, which creates low end torque, into flip a little short runner, which makes higher end power. And the Holly, I guess this is their out of the box tune for controlling that thing. And I don't think that it's like a curve. I think it's on and off, right?
It's throttle position and RPM based is my understanding.
But there's no point where they intentionally run the thing like halfway, because it doesn't work that way. It's just
Not
on
that I'm aware of.
or off. So can we go in the computer and flop the valve and look at a runner length comparison?
This is a brand new computer, but I'm assuming we can try.
Yeah, now that would be cool. I think what we should do is, do you want to just run it all the way short and all the way long and see how it affects the curve? That'd be kind of educational.
That'd be the two extremes, and then you can see this is where you combine the short and long runner. I mean,
yeah. Well, I assume it's changing. Well, maybe it's changing here. I don't know. I'm wondering if we can get this dip out of the curve by actually doing something earlier or later.
I think it's going to have a dip somewhere.
Yeah, me too.
If it opens somewhere, it's going to change from making torque to making top end, I think. So it'll have some sort of dip somewhere, but I think it's just kind of cool to be able to control that.
Yeah. No, let's check it out. That's newfangled.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Good stuff.
All right.
Brule, give me long runners.
And
We'll
short
try
runners, both.
Both?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, do both and then we'll compare them.
Got it coming.
Cool.
Okay.
So what we're getting ready to do here is we actually, with the Holly software, have the ability to control the intake manifold runner length. Holly allows us to contour this with throttle position and RPM, so we can do that at any point that we want to. So I generally am running the dyno, and Ishmael Candy, who's one of our EFI experts here, is going to go ahead and do the EFI tuning for us.
He's running it now with the runner set long. This is going to be really interesting. And like that, we pressed a few buttons and now it's short runners. That looked like this is going to be cool.
Even the old guy says it was cool.
Oh, really? All right.
It definitely does something, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's like hit the button.
I was
Different engine.
Yeah, I'm just thinking through my head. It's actually changing things, what appear to be mechanical changes, but they're actually electronic changes. I mean, well, no, actually they're not.
It is
they are
mechanical.
mechanical.
It's fully
but you're able to-
mechanical.
but you're able to do it electronically.
Yeah.
Long.
Wow.
Wait, there's a dual plane, single plane intake manifold change.
Like that.
Boom.
Wow, that's amazing. So the red lines here are the long runners, which are making beef low-end torque, but then right at 4,900 RPM, it swaps over, and then that long runner just cannot make the power. And then, of course, the black lines are where the short runner killed all the torque and then took off above 4,900. We did this earlier in an episode with some variable runner lengths in an LS intake manifold. And of course, we've done dual plane versus single plane forever. But talk about a A/B test within 1 minute apart.
With the click of a button.
The click of a button. That really shows you what's going on here. You know what else it tells you? Is that if you've got one of these engines and you're shopping around for an aftermarket intake manifold and you get one of those Chinese tunnel rams with the little tiny short runners, then what you're looking at is this.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're throwing away a ton of torque.
Yep.
And I would honestly bet you that you're not making the same horsepower as this either.
This is the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and then you'd probably, common sense would just say change it someplace in here so we've got all the torque, and then we pick it up and have all the top, and that's right where that dip was.
Will you overlay our first run so that we can see?
Will.
I bet you, like, what did you say? It's gonna match down here with one curve and match up there with another curve.
And there'll be that little dip right here that
there.
you were talking about.
Right.
Where they transition, yeah.
I kind of want to see if we can tune that and make it more gooder. All right, so the blue lines now are the run that we did before with the Holly's out-of-the-box control of that, what's it called, SRV, short runner valve.
Yes.
And so,
Well, look,
That's right where it clicked open. Right there where the dip is.
Right there at 4,900
follows
RPM. Imagine that.
Yeah, it follows one and then it grabs the other one for the rest of the ride.
That is awesome. I'm not sure there's any improving that, actually.
No, I think it's got the best of both right there. It saw right where it crossed, took that number and said, I'm going to change it there, and brought it up.
Yeah.
Let's put the SRV back to where Holly had it from the factory, and then let's mess with cam timing.
Kind of looks like they did the intake manifold right, so now we can see if there's anything in cam time.
So we can only make it worse from here?
Probably.
Kind of my norm. VVT up next, yeah?
Yeah.
Variable valve timing.
Besides being able to control intake manifold runner length, we're also able to control camshaft timing electronically. Now, to be honest with you, Ishmael and myself worked on this thing for probably better than an hour, and we were only able to find a little bit at part throttle as far as improvement. So I have to honestly say Holly really has this camshaft timing map optimized.
Looks like that performed as expected also.
Yet, advancing and retarding the camshaft is no magic on a Hemi.
Yeah, what we're looking at here is the red lines are more retarded and the black lines are more advanced. More advanced cam ends up making more low-end power, more retarded cam ends up making more top-end power. We don't actually know how much we advanced or retarded, honestly, because we don't know where we started and we don't know what the range is in the software. Yeah, but it just tells you can go hit a button and tune this up.
And I can tell you that it's a significant effect. If you look at the top end right there, that's a big difference at 6,000 RPM.
It's huge. Yeah, totally huge. If you just got the Holly computer right out of the box, though, and plugged it in, it would give you the curves that we had earlier, right?
Yes.
So once again, let's compare their out-of-the-box tune-up versus advancing or retarding it from there. And I think what we'll find is that it's probably the best of both worlds, because with the VVT, yeah, exactly. It's a layover of the best bottom end and the best top end, because again, the VVT is adjusting the cam timing on the fly so that it's idealized for every point in the RPM chart. So that guy, Matt at Holly, spent hours.
He did a good job of kind of optimizing the cam timing throughout the RPM range.
Okay, cool. What do you want to do next?
It's camshaft time, isn't it?
We're going to throw a bigger cam in this thing.
That'll be good.
And the problem is, we don't know how.
Quick overview, long afternoon. Basically, we're going to have to disassemble this thing all the way down pretty much to a short block. To do a MDS is what Mopar calls it, but it's basically a displacement on demand system. It has different lifters that go along with this camshaft. Lifters don't come out of this engine with the cylinder heads on, so we're going to have to remove the intake manifold, cylinder heads, front of the engine to remove the camshaft, start replacing all those parts, cam lifters, head gaskets. We need to do a partial lockout on the variable valve timing because we're still going to use the VVT, but we can't let it retard as far as it did. Honestly, we're going to kind of try to take this a little slower than normal just because we're not as familiar with this as we are, some old traditional muscle stuff. So we're kind of learning as we go a little bit as well, but I think we've got a fairly good idea of where to go.
Ishmael's gonna train me on VVT. I've never actually worked on one of these, but it kind of makes sense. What is that part?
Okay, so this here is your VVT oil pressure control valve. It basically goes mounted to the back of the engine here, and then you have 3 ports on the cam, and then you basically have a fill, a drain, and a feed. And then based on how much you pulse it, you will add more oil and the cam will advance.
The oil comes through, you can see there's multiple passages in here, and it goes into that phaser and rotor assembly, and basically oil on one side advances the cam,
Yes.
and if it dumps that and feeds it onto the other side, then it retards the camera. I guess it really only advances or releases.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Cool. And finally, the reason we tore this entire garbage apart, the camshaft. So I called my buddies at Arrington Performance, which is shophemi.com. They specialize in nothing but these Gen 3 Hemis. And I said, look, I don't want to think about it. I want the biggest cam I can put in this thing that will not give me a valve to piston clearance problem, and it's all stock. And they said, no problem. They delivered this comp camshaft that the specs on it are very much like what you see in a modern LS engine. Anything with like a great cylinder head that wants to RPM, but has enough head to make good torque. It's 223 duration at 50 on the intake side, and it's got a big spread in duration. The exhaust side is 235. So what's that? 12-degree split between intake and exhaust, and it's on 114-degree lobe separation angle. The lift is a big 610 on the intake, 620 on the exhaust. So hopefully this is gonna wake up this pooch. I mean, this fine piece of late model performance equipment that I am learning to love as we speak.
That was a lot of work. We had our 5.7 Hemi all the way down to a bare short block to do what we needed to do. And what we did was we put in a bigger camshaft and we put in a VVT limiter to work with that cam. Now it's back to the dyno. We're gonna run this thing and see what it does.
And there you go, a 5.7 Hemi with nothing but a cam swap, 504.8 horsepower at 6,400 RPM, and down at 4,600 RPM, 463 pound-feet of torque. Now, it took some wiggling and some messing with the cam timing in order to do that, so train me on what you did.
You know, it's got the limiter in it, so we've stopped it from being able to retard as far as it could, because our understanding is that if it's going to crash something, it's when it retards, not so much when it advances. So Ishmael kind of helped me through a lot of that stuff and looked at the limiters and that sort of thing and what the controller was doing. And we ran the cam timing all over the place on this thing, trying to optimize it. We've got a little bit of a dip here. That's the short runner valve.
Same thing we saw before.
Activating. So we've tried to optimize this every place we pretty much could, and with just some timing and tweaking and cam timing and fuel and all of those things, we were able to get the thing to bump over 500.
But the cam timing was a little bit insensitive, right?
Well,
Now, especially down low, we found when we were going through it, it just, like you said, it's insensitive.
Maybe that explains why most of the Mopar drag race guys just lock it out and don't even worry about it.
yeah, I mean, we ran that bottom end timing up to about 4,500. We moved that as much as a full 8-degree swing. You know, effectively 8 degrees.
Right.
Actually, we were commanding more, but because of the limiter, it wouldn't let us move it more. But typically 8 degrees, we're gonna see something. We didn't see it on this.
That's more than it's even possible to swing on most race engines that we deal with.
Yeah.
Right.
Huh, interesting. So I guess we should look at the overlay of what this did versus the stock camshaft. That's huge.
Right.
That's really huge. I thought there was a possibility that this cam was going to make torque everywhere, even though it was bigger because the stock cam was so small, but obviously that's an inaccurate belief here. We did throw away some bottom-end torque with the larger camshaft, but look at the gains up top, and it's not just that it's more here, it's that the thing runs out another, what is that, 600 RPM plus?
Right.
Yeah, it went from, 5,900 to 6,500.
To running to 65, yeah.
Well,
Pretty
and
impressive.
we worked on that. We worked on the bottom end a lot, thinking we could advance the cam and get it to come back. And realistically, I mean, that's all the bottom end this thing's gonna make with this much cam. So once again, nothing's free.
I really don't think it cares where the cam is parked when you've got 30 degrees or so more camshaft timing. That's just gonna cost you bottom end. That's the trade-off. And There's no witchcraft that's going to make that change, I think.
It's the same thing we see on regular old muscle car engines, but somehow these new engines seem magical, like they'll just make more. But this is the same thing you saw in your prior cam testing with these things, isn't it?
Yeah. You go a lot bigger in the cam, you're going to give up bottom end for that 500 horsepower up top.
We talked about camshaft timing a lot, but there's also ignition timing, which is interesting because in researching this, we're trying to talk to other experts and such, and we're seeing a lot of people say, oh yeah, we run 16 degrees of timing total in these engines to make peak power. And then you called Tony Bischoff, who, by the way, has won a bunch of the Engine Masters Challenge competitions with Gen 3 Hemis, arguably building some of the most radical NA Gen 3 Hemis that there are. And he said?
Well, I mean, Bischoff finds like what we found, 27, 28 degrees on a mild NA engine like this, or even some of his race stuff.
Felt good to have the confirmation that there wasn't something whacked about what we were doing, because yeah, that's the number it seems to like.
It did, because I talked to a couple of guys and they went, oh, 16 max, that's it.
Yeah.
And that's with the Chrysler computer, not the Holly. So I don't know what the difference of the SKU is there. What I know is I let the engine tell me what it wanted.
Yeah.
Started out at like 20, and I kept throwing 2 at it. And then when the power keeps going up, I know that that's what it wants. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is, a lot of times these engines have no timing pointer. I question whether some tuners actually know what the timing actually is versus what they're seeing on their screen on the computer.
I think Mopar guys in general want to believe their stuff is so special that it's somehow different and has different laws of physics than other engines.
It is an internal combustion engine, so.
Maybe I was like speaking to the wrong person about that. I found that Mopar guys sometimes get whacked out of their mind. Oh, what?
Mopar guy. As much as I am.
So kind of the whole point of this episode was Holly wanting to prove to me personally that this is a viable engine in the marketplace. And between the data that they've given me about just how many challenges are out there and how many engine swaps are going on, between seeing the Moparty event that they just got involved with, that was huge, and being able to see that this thing makes 500 horsepower with nothing but a cam swap, I say I'll win. I still say it's a little more complicated than it really needs to be versus an LS, but nonetheless, nothing wrong with the Gen 3 Hemi, right?
Good stuff, really good stuff.
Yeah, maybe we should put one in the Mopar muscle truck.
Oh yeah. Roadkill Garage?
Yeah, we'll do that on Roadkill Garage, but meanwhile, if we do that, I think we should build a really good stroker version of one of these, and if we do, you'll see that on Engine Masters. Okay, cool. What do you want to do next?
What do I want to do, or what do we have to do?
Where did that come from? That R means right. It doesn't mean wrong, okay? Yeah, you can see it's got an R right there. And if you that up, you're just like not paying attention. Now, it says top here. That does not mean anything other than the orientation there has to go upward. Upward is the top. Arriba!